And welcome to all. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to some of you. My name is Brinton Likes, and I am here in Boston, a community cultural psychologist at the Lynch School of Education at Boston College and with our Center for Human Rights and International Justice. It's a pleasure to be with all of you this evening, with many of my colleagues from Chile and Argentina, as well as from Boston and the Bay Area of California, with whom we gathered 32 years ago on this very day in the wake of the violent assassination of the Jesuits at their university.
Great, thank you, Brinton. Peace and love, everyone. My name is Trina Jackson, and I am the co-facilitator or co-MC of tonight's event. I am the Solidarity Program Officer for our U.S. Internationalist Program at Grassroots International. And Grassroots International is really honored to be, first of all, part of this event tonight, but also to be collaborating on the Martine Barreau Initiative as part of our grant-making program, which is to support social movements in the Global South, defending the right to food, land, and water. We know that US imperialism, colonialism through war and militarism, for example, traumatizes at the individual and the collective level. And we believe in the power of social movements to heal these wounds in order to create transformative change.
We want to thank you for being with us this evening, but also to recognize that here in the Boston area, we are on the ancestral lands of the tribal nations of the Pawtucket, the Wasatut, the Nipmuc, and the Wampanoag. And there are many challenges for those of us who are the descendants of those who colonized these lands. We owe them so much, and we are challenged to explore how to respond to white supremacy and to redress the racialized gendered violence, the homophobia, and the historic and ongoing violence that we have perpetrated on their lands. We invite you to join us and our co-sponsors here at Boston College, FACES, the BC's student-run anti-racist organization, as well as the Organization of Latin American Affairs. And we are delighted to be co-sponsored also by the activist organization Cambridge, Massachusetts, El Salvador Sister City Projects. You've met our interpreters, and we are very grateful to them for sharing with us, and regret that we are only translating into 2 languages, but affirm our commitment to language justice tonight and as we move forward. Thank you for being with us, and Trina will now introduce our speakers who will share with us the ways in which they are working collaboratively to respond to some of the violences that we have just briefly described. After those presentations, we will have a time for you to share with each other, to talk about your experiences of well-being, of justice, and of your efforts to redress these oppressions in these difficult times in which we're living. I want to first acknowledge what we're commemorating this evening. I mentioned that 32 years ago, Ignacio Martín Barreau was assassinated in El Salvador alongside Segundo Montes, Ignacio Ellacuría, Juan Ramón Moreno, Joaquín López y López, Armando López, Elba Itzalina Ramos. It is widely known, and I think well documented, that the US government provided more than $1 billion in military aid to El Salvador, and was in large part responsible for much of the violence that took place in that country, in which more than 75,000 people were killed, 8,000 were disappeared, and more than 1 million displaced. That conflict ended in 1992 with a UN nation-brokered peace agreement, although multiple violence continues and persists in the region today. We were delighted in 2020 to learn of the victory for justice in the conviction of Inocente Orlando Montano, who was a Salvadoran colonel involved in the murders of these 6 Jesuit priests and these 2 women. And yet that was a small victory that required huge effort and justice-seeking organizing among many in El Salvador and beyond. So today we commemorate not only those Jesuits and those 2 women, but the many who have been killed in their struggles for a just and equitable world. The Martín Barreau Initiative for Wellbeing and Human Rights is a particular way of remembering some of the challenges brought forth by Ignacio Martín Barreau, known as Nacho to many of his friends, and as Iggy to many of the Boston College students who live in a house named for him and for the UCA's president, Ignacio Ellacuría. During his lifetime, Nacho urged psychologists and those working in mental health to walk alongside those affected by systemic impoverishment and state violence, and more particularly those directly affected by armed conflicts that were raging in Central America in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. He challenged his colleagues to commit to liberate psychology as that was being practiced in the northern centers of neoliberal capitalism, towards listening to psychology, and I quote him, of the people, grounded in the understanding of buen vivir, or living well, a nascent idea among Salvadoran peasants with whom he worked. Many of us within universities and working as licensed mental health practitioners exercise professions that are rooted in systems and structures of racism, of neocolonialism, of patriarchy, and of homophobia, with theories and research that dominate a praxis that fosters accommodation or adaptation rather than transformative justice. Decades after Nacho's death, some of us in the global north are only beginning to risk stepping outside of those institutions to take actions that reflect a rethinking of our work, one that seeks to decolonize these knowledge systems that marginalize traditional beliefs and practices and are critical of the psychology of El Pueblo. We are challenged to learn from the ways of being and knowing expressed by local organizers and activists who share many of their communities' indigenous beliefs and practices and mobilize resources to contribute to healing. Some among our group were invited to accompany grassroots organizing and social movements for liberation in Central America and formed the Martin Baró Fund, now the Martin Baró Initiative, and now a partner with Grassroots International to connect our energy and resources of donors and activists in the United States with a global grant-making strategy to advance social reparation and support the collective power of communities to heal some of the multiple effects of violence and injustice. These communities draw on Nacho's liberation psychology. They also draw on what they call healing justice, seeking to yoke the praxis of justice to that of healing. And they build knowledges generated by their ancestors, complemented by others within and beyond their borders, that recognize that well-being can never be achieved in the absence of equity and justice for all of life within a pluriverse. This year, the Martin Baró Initiative has supported 11 local communities, social movements, and non-governmental organizations in Palestine, Guatemala, El Salvador, Brazil, Haiti, Liberia, and among refugees in Brooklyn, New York. These groups and organizations have mobilized traditional beliefs, social movement building, and community organizing towards articulating culturally grounded projects for accompanying those directly affected by the violations that we've briefly described here. Their understanding is grounded in an analysis of historic violence and of Pachamama, or Mother Earth. They form an integral whole of multiple systems, including the rights of territories and rivers, systems of which we as humans are but a small part. We will hear from two of these groups this evening. Before concluding, I want to remind us that Nacho wrote, and I quote, "What counts is not so much knowing how to code or decode strange words, but rather learning to say the word of one's own existence, a word which is personal, but more importantly, collective. And to pronounce that personal and collective word, people must take hold of their fate, take the reins of their lives, a move that demands an overcoming false consciousness and achieving a critical understanding of themselves as well as of their world where they stand in it. As such, the groups we support strive to facilitate processes of relationality and engagement, to position themselves to redress ongoing harms of structural, colonial, and historic violence. We affirm their conception of justice that supports Indigenous peoples' self-determination on their lands and through their livelihoods. Ignacio urged us to de-ideologize the dominant knowledge of systems and to lift up knowledges, practices, and wisdoms of El Pueblo. And that is a call from a growing number of social movements today. Decolonizing the land means acknowledging its persistent agency, recognizing its rights, and recentering it as living. Territory is recognized, and I quote, as a living whole, the sustenance of identity and harmony. Social movements, indigenous peoples, including the activists protesting COP26 in Glasgow, and many more of the majority world, demand redress from the injustices wrought upon them by those of us in the global north. They demand a return of their territories, a respect for all living beings, a praxis that affirms healing, justice, and buen vivir. We look forward to continuing to learn from them and their diverse healing practices as we support them in philanthropic solidarity. We now turn to our guests to hear about their work in Palestine and Guatemala, and will then invite you for brief discussions and breakout groups. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll begin with Devin G. Atala, who is an assistant professor in the psychology department at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. Dr. Atala's research team at UMB is entitled the DARA Collective for Healing and Liberation, where DARA is an acronym for Decolonial Anti-Racism Research and Action. As a practitioner, activist, community member, scholar, and healer, Dr. Atala focuses contributing to the healing, justice, and decolonization journeys in Palestine and in partnership with communities of color in Boston and in communities in Wamapu, Chile. Joining him will be Hana R. Massoud, who is a postdoctoral research fellow in Dr. Atala's research team at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. Dr. Massoud is also currently the chair of the Decolonial Racial Justice Practice, Justice in Praxis, an initiative of psychologists for social responsibility. Dr. Massoud has completed her doctorate in community psychology from the National Louis University in Chicago. And then we're posting more about each of those speakers in the chat. And then the second person that I will introduce, and they will also introduce more of their team when they're speaking, is Anne-Marie Chamotte. Anne-Marie is the co-founder and acting director of Buena Semilla, a grassroots organization in Guatemala supporting indigenous and other marginalized populations of Guatemala in reclaiming their voice, agency, self-determination, and buen vivir, or collective well-being. She is a practitioner, activist, and thought leader in decolonizing, holistic, community-based, and community-led approaches to individual and collective health and well-being. For now, I'll turn it over to Devin and Dr. Massoud.
Thank you, Trina. Thank you, everyone. Hannah and I decided to begin with a poem. This is a poem by Muhammad Al-Kur, who is a frontliner in struggle against ongoing colonialism in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood of East Jerusalem. And even as this poem, I'll give a quick context. Can you hear me okay? A quick context. He says, even as I write this, our family lawyer is attempting to persuade a settler judge to rule against settlements, a zebra at the mercy of a jury of hyenas. So this is the context of him writing the poem. It's called Born on Nakba Day. Nakba is what we call the initial conquest of our lands, colonial conquest in 1948. And we also describe our current condition as an everyday Nakba. So the disaster, even though it began with the colonialism of 1948, it continues every day. So this poem is called Born on Nakba Day. Your unkindness rewrote my autobiography into punchlines and guts, blades for tongues, a mouth pregnant with thunder. Your unkindness told me to push through. Look, listen. I was born on the 50th anniversary of the Nakba to a mother who reaped olives and figs and other Quranic verses. Watini wa Zaytun. My name, a bomb in a white room, a walking suspicion in an airport, choiceless politics. I was born on the 50th anniversary of the Nakba. Outside the hospital room, protests, burnt rubber, kafir faces, and bare bodies, stones thrown onto tanks, tanks imprinted with US flags, lands smelling of tear gas, skies tilled with rubber-coated bullets, a few bodies shot, dead, died, numbers in a headline. I and my sister were born. Birth lasts longer than death in Palestine. Death is sudden, instant, constant, happens in between breaths. I was born among poetry on the 50th anniversary. The liberation chants outside the hospital room told my mother to push. So welcome, and I understand that I'm a guest in many ways to this space, but I guess I'm welcoming you to my home as well in some ways. And Hannah and I also talked about beginning with talking a little bit about our village very briefly. Each of our villages, we're from different villages. My ancestors are from Beit Jala, my grandparents' generation in 1948, were displaced. And even though there's an impossibility of returning to our lands after colonialism, because of the impossibility of returning to what life was like before the colonial violence and trauma, we can return to our lands, and we do, and we will continue to move into a future of healing together. And these are my trees. Welcome to these. Many of these are from Palestine, brought over, smuggled. So this is kind of stealing my land home. Lemon, olive, and some other trees. But in Beit Jala, our olives are special, our olive oil is special. And also at this time of the year, I'd be harvesting ruman, one of my favorite, which is of course pomegranate. So welcome, and I'll pass it to Hannah.
Thank you, Devin. And thank you for sharing this very powerful poem by Muhammad al-Kurd from Sheikh Jarrah, Jerusalem. Ahlan wa sahlan, welcome everybody. I want to start us off with a really inspiring, grounding question that was offered by Grace Lee when she meets such wonderful change makers like yourselves. What time is it on the clock of the world? So what time is it on the clock of Palestine? On the clock of Palestine, this is a time of olive harvest. And usually the time of olive harvest in my village becomes a battlefield in other villages and refugee camps and all, different lands, stolen lands in Palestine, where we have a lot of volunteers coming from all over the world to come to volunteer and to assist with the olive harvest to somehow show some peace, embodiment of justice and liberation, that this is a time of celebrating the land for giving us such a wonderful fruit, such as olive, and it has a lot of significant symbolic meaning to our rootedness to the land and Palestine, and it's healing and it's also tasty. So this is the time on the clock of Palestine right now. And also in my village, this season of the year, where because people want to celebrate and harvest their olives, Israel starts practicing their open fire policy on living creatures, people, animals, So the image right here behind me is an image of a child who was killed by a sniper last year in December. His name is Ali Abu Alia. He was participating in those peaceful demonstrations to go harvest the olive trees. So today I want to bring him and honor his legacy, where in a settler colonial genocidal world, trees and horses and also humans are a target for the open fire policy that is exercised by Israel. And thank you for being part of our land today, and guests and volunteers for the change and peacemaking. So Devin will be sharing some slides about our work back home.
Okay, so now we're going to move right adjacent to my village, the Beit Jala, is Mukhayam Aida, the Aida refugee camp. And so we're going to speak a little bit about the work that Hana and I, even though it's not our village, it's a real honor for us to be building community and building in even a very small way, contributing and following the footsteps of Aida camp residents and leaders in making possible our collaboration. And so shout out to so many of the Aida camp families who always have welcomed us with such the praxis of their own, the way that the openness and invitations are met with. Hana and I try to move with humility and also with always ready to be belligerently beautiful, I think, and make trouble, and to follow the lead of frontliners and what it means to promote health when in such a targeted space, right? Because as we'll talk about, Aida is really on the front lines of colonialism. And as you know, in the news recently, of course, Sheikh Jarrah has been understood as a front line. As Hana was saying, in this season, many of the olive orchards fields are, of course, Gaza is, but many of the refugee camps, especially Aida in the West Bank context. So here are some, have up just some information. I'm sorry for the translators, to those who are interpreting, that I did not send this beforehand, so you could have access to these texts. But basically, it's important to know that in the Aida camp, there's the people are all indigenous peoples from 27 different villages or more that have been colonized in what is now the 48 or what is in Israel. And there's constant military presence, regular incursions by the Israeli military. So I'm trying to press forward. Let's see. Next slide. There. Okay. These are just some photos of the campus surrounded by sniper towers on 4 sides. And these photos were taken by Mohammed Al-Azza, who is the director of the Laji Center. But you can see, we're just sharing a few photos with you quickly as we move into our description of our work. A study by a group from, I believe this was from Berkeley, UC Berkeley School of Law, in partnership with the public health program there, found that Aida camp was one of the highest, if not the highest, tear gas zone in the world, and this was in 2018. But it just kind of gives you an understanding of the level of violence and that people are subjected to by the Israeli occupation. This is also a picture taken in the community center that we partner with. You can see its proximity to the colonial wall, the apartheid wall. So the Laji Center Was started in 2000 by community activists and community organizers. And I really want to uplift, because of time, we're going really quickly, but I want to uplift a community organizer in particular. Salah Al-Jarma, his birthday recently passed, and he died last year. So this is the anniversary of his birthday. He died this year, but about 6 months ago. And so much of our work, Allah Yarhamu, is really in his legacy space. This is Salah in so many ways. Community organizers make possible the work of healers, right? And so I think we really try to move from a place of understanding that whatever we do is because of people like Salah, who do the work of turning the soil and making possible any things to grow so deeply in our communities. So just wanted to take a moment to remember Salah. And these are the community health workers that we partner with, who are doing really incredible work, visiting house to house, and helping with COVID testing, focusing on diabetes and hypertension, of course, which, as we know, are really deeply interrelated with mental health, right? These are just some images we're moving through to show their work, and they also visit schools and are involved in summer camp activities, information at elder centers, and a lot of the home visits that they do. This is a quote from one of the community health workers. I think that we, the CHWs, are a bridge in between, and we give not only medical but social help to the people. And this is another quote by one of the community health workers. A doctor told me, there's a guy and you might be able to help him because he went to prison yourself. So I talked to him the first time, and I saw that he was isolated in need of help. So I kept meeting with him and talking with him, and to help him be more part of the community. And so then after that, his situation got better. So you see this kind of bridging that the community health workers are doing. Many of them, or not many of this, and this community health worker in particular has been incarcerated himself by the Israeli occupation, and understood the level of torture, the level of challenges which is coming back into the community. And so it was able to support other people coming out of the colonial prison. And Hannah, did you want to say anything else about social accompaniment as praxis?
Sure, but before I say a few lines about the social accompaniment that we practice in our collective, I want to just give a shout out to one of the community organizers of Laji Center. His name is Nidal Al-Azraq. He's not sharing his image, so maybe this is an opportunity to encourage him to show his image.
Nidal is here? Oh.
Nidal is here, and because of, yes, and Ahlan wa sahlan Nidal, and because of Nidal and other amazing radical community organizers, they create the possibility for healers to come and make the change and give us this golden opportunity to meet with the wonderful community health workers on the ground. So my work and our work as collective is just to be there for the community health workers on the ground and offer them basically any insights, advices, skills, tools, practices that can help them in their critical healing work and journey. So the work that we do, me personally, is trying to generate indigenous psychology that they can practice when I leave and I go back to my village. All the psychology is there. They have the knowledges. They just need to trust their own insights, to rely heavily on their ancestral healing practices and to bring them forward. So the accompaniment is more of showing up, being present, and generating love and hope and trust, and generating psychology that resonates with their outside world, so they become more encouraged to practice the theory that is already in their flesh, in their bodies. Devin, you want to say more about our aims?
Yes, sure. Yes, thank you, Hannah. And so part of what we're trying to do is really, and I should quick also shout out to Cesar Hakim, Youssef Al-Ajarma, Aya Darwish, Abir Musleh, and Shada Al-Azza, who and Rayyan Al-Fatafta, who are also part of our collective, and who couldn't be here today. Many of those in Palestine. It's, I think, 1 a.m. now, pretty much. So even though folks wanted to be here, that was not really practical for them to be here at this time. But we meet once a month and once a week in different settings. So once a month we meet all together as a broader community, and then once a week we are meeting to provide psychosocial supervision and supporting the community health workers. So much of the there's so much talk about helping and making people be resilient, right? When in so many ways, if you don't invest in really supporting frontline workers, then you're not addressing how dehumanizing the situation is. And there's further, there's so many ways that we're contributing to the problem when we're expecting colonized and people of color and other from other minoritized groups to be resilient rather than to focus on change systems. And this is really rooted in Martin Barro's piece, right? And what we learned from Martin Barro in so many ways is about how to disrupt the focus on providing individual work when we know that millions of people are affected by the same problem, right? And how absurd it is to, in many ways, to think about the emphasis on in how important it is to focus on community level activism, community level work. So the community health workers who are doing that day in, day out, in many ways our role, we see ourselves as making sure that they know we have their back, right? And that the Ladji Center, of course, has their back. And so we also need to be supporting Ladji and seeing what, and so this is the focus. And through this process, we're developing a workbook where every module, every session of it, every training is the community health workers are writing it themselves, So in so many ways, it's like having writing a syllabus and saying to the students, you write your own syllabus. We're going to write the syllabus with you, but you tell us really what you need to learn. Like you're living on the front lines. Many of the tools that have been handed down around clinical practice or psychosocial work are laden with colonial cognitions, with colonial ways of and epistemologies of understanding what is health and what is wellness, what is illness, when we're trying to disrupt that. So that's kind of the core of what our practice is about. I don't know if Hannah, you want to add anything at this point before we close?
No, I'm excited to go to our discussion and questions from our community here.
Well, thank you both. And I won't take up too much time, and I will turn it over to Anne-Marie.
It's such an honor to be here with you today to commemorate the life and legacy of Ignacio Martin Barro, and to be, just sharing this space with just such incredible other collectives and individuals. I really loved your presentation just now. Thank you so much for the invitation, and thanks so much to all of you also for your presence. Martin Barro's writings, combined with his visions, are an incredible source of both grounding and hope, inviting us to firmly root down with local realities, struggles, and perspectives, all the while holding on to a dream that a different world is possible. And this, we really hold this to our heart in Buena Semilla. The indigenous peoples of Guatemala carry along an ongoing history of colonization, dispossession, exclusion, and structural racism. And then Guatemala's recent armed conflict, which in effect was a genocide against the Maya, left profound traces on local populations, including a sense of hopelessness, and the destruction of just about everything, and perhaps most importantly, the social fabric of families and communities. And then women in Guatemala additionally experience some of the highest levels of gender-based violence in the world. Our project started, as many do, when a well-meaning individual standing in a place of privilege, like myself, lands among some of the most marginalized of the marginalized, like Indigenous Maya Mam women of Guatemala, hoping to find herself useful and vice versa. In the words of Martin Baró, it is not easy to define how to insert ourselves into processes from the side of the oppressed and not from that of the oppressor. It is not easy to give up our role of professional superiority and work hand in hand with popular groups. But if we do not embark on this new type of praxis, which in addition to transforming reality transforms ourselves, we will hardly be able to contribute to the liberation of our peoples. And as local Maya women and myself have been joined over the years by an ever-increasing number of collaborators and local men and women, this has really been our journey. A humbling one that has required all of us, more than anything, to listen deeply, unlearn just about everything we ever thought we knew, and last but not least, transform or allow ourselves to be transformed deeply by the experience. Over the last 12 years, we have been, together with local communities, really weaving into being collective safe spaces for local women and also most recently for men, spaces able to hold both the reality of the struggle and also the dream of a new reality. And then within this duality, allow for profound healing and transformation to occur, both at an individual and a collective level.
Más lento. Slower.
Okay, sorry. I wish to start by sharing a short video about one of the most, our central activities that we do, the Women's Circles, and then hand the space over to 3 of my local partners, who I will introduce later, who are also 3 of my greatest friends, teachers, and co-inspirers.
Organización Buena Semilla no Cruto, en Cruto Ishki, familia pueblos indígenas, ani Nametrich Puaba, una organización para Shinilia Santiago Atitlán, Ichka San Juan Otulcalco. Banit San Kiruto Ishki, San Kiruto Sarakiva, con un cohechubik in Kiben, con un enco pensar in Kiben Hea. Y jajababa y que ishqi rituan porque ishqi nkatsina apoyo chica ya que chpam jaqtinamet mahonja en una asistencia irshinidia.
El objetivo principal de los círculos de mujeres es crear un espacio en donde las mujeres puedan ser libres, puedan también canalizar todas esas emociones que tal vez en casa no lo pueden hacer y aparte formar una red de amistad, de hermandad en donde las mujeres puedan expresarse, apoyarse y tener como que un espacio donde también puedan expresar sus sentimientos, sus emociones y sentir esperanza.
Participar en un círculo de mujeres ha sido el inicio de algo maravilloso y profundamente transformador en la vida de muchas mujeres, en donde logran encontrar sus alas, su propia voz, su propia luz y atreverse a compartirles quizás por primera vez, donde se dan el permiso de sonreír, reír, crecer, florecer, donde logran superar sus miedos y se vuelven lideresas, ejemplos, inspiraciones para otras mujeres.
أنا ما هنقاسني وين كم شوف آخر إيش كنتي أنا أوبراسيون نوكان بتقشق بعضين بتسرع la primera vez شي بيبي تقش segunda vez شق بتشي كونسمان ترشم أن بتش ما هو أجيك شي بيتبي شي قبان خانق أكتيفيت أشياء بنش قبتش شق شخف خا شقبان خيلات يا لول لا خلاص نعنن إخقاش بكخا يبيل إخقاش شرويا أكنن بيتي
Amach oninim porque y como que voy a cochipo mastak shitak niati nim in tapalto nui chichon obe el cane entonces como que hasta tocan nui te mistis tarnet nui to nui inatson pero qelbet con ratkan Hasta pontil que no huita, huicuan, senten, lastamente tú y un montón de cosas. Hasta surtiendo no, entonces, asunte, escutene tochmo, chinak silknig ete, chinak sayek el que, ni mushna haces más paye.
Tengo mucha esperanza que con tu apoyo vamos a poder lanzar nuestra nueva iniciativa Juntas nos levantamos. Se trata de apoyar a nuestras lideresas, que son de los pueblos Mam, Quiche y Tzutuil, para que puedan formar a 10 nuevas lideresas.
Yeah.
So then I'd like to then invite my 3 colleagues who will be sharing their reflections about our work and a bit more in depth about it. So Sadi Garcia will be the first to present. She's just an incredible woman, a Quiche Maya woman from Quetzaltenango, who's been working with Buena Semilla now for the last 5 or 6 years. So Sadi, I don't know if
¿Qué tal?
someone...
Aquí estoy. No sé si me escuchan.
Sí, Sadi, te escuchamos.
Creo que sí. Ok. Bueno, buenas tardes, buenas noches. Estoy muy contenta de estar acá compartiendo el trabajo de Buena Semilla y todo lo que hemos estado realizando alrededor de casi 12 años. Mi nombre es Sadi García, soy de Quetzaltenango y pues Quetzaltenango, Guatemala, en el occidente de Guatemala, y acompaño en los procesos de sanación, organización y movilización comunitaria en el área de San Juan Ostumcalco, un área MAM, Maya MAM. Y pues estoy muy contenta de poder compartir, aunque sea un poquitito, de lo que estamos haciendo. Y bueno, hablar de la psicología de la liberación es hablar de transformación y la transformación a partir de las comunidades. Eso es lo que a través de los círculos de mujeres con Buena Semilla hemos estado realizando, un proceso de transformación comunitaria, en donde la voz individual se une y hace unidad y se convierte en una voz colectiva, haciendo cambios transformadores, muy sutiles, pero a la vez bastante impactantes. Estos cambios, bueno, en realidad no son realmente cambios, sino que es la recuperación de prácticas ancestrales que debido a nuestra historia, debido a muchos procesos de colonización, se fueron perdiendo. Sin embargo, se han ido recuperando poco a poco y a través de los círculos de mujeres hemos estado logrando eso. Un ejemplo que me gustaría darles esta tarde y que me siento muy contenta y muy feliz de poder compartirlo a todos ustedes es el hecho de que a través de estos círculos de mujeres, nosotras tenemos 10 lideresas en el área de San Juan Ostumcalco. Estas lideresas han guiado a otras mujeres de sus comunidades y poco a poco, a través de estos años, han sido reconocidas como consejeras. Cada lideresa atiende aproximadamente de 25 a 50 mujeres mensualmente. ¿Qué quiere decir esto? Que estamos recuperando esa parte tan importante que hacían nuestros ancestros, que era la consejería, que era el buscar a las mujeres para esos consejos. Estas mujeres se han ganado ese reconocimiento, no hay necesidad de promocionarlas, la misma comunidad las está reconociendo y esa es parte de una movilización comunitaria que a través de los círculos de mujeres ha empezado a recuperarse porque se había perdido. Entonces, la parte liberadora de esto es el ver a las mujeres creando redes de apoyo, creando redes de amor, de amistad, de hermandad. La verdad que es una dicha, es un honor poder contarles esta experiencia porque a través de los círculos de mujeres hemos ido recuperando estos espacios que, como les decía, históricamente habían sido perdidos y que hoy estamos nuevamente en el proceso de la recuperación y que la misma sanación venga desde las mujeres para las mujeres y hacerlo de una forma colectiva. Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias, Adi. I now wanted to introduce two more of our local colleagues, Dolores Zapalu and Diego Petzey, who are both Tzutuil Maya from Santiago Atitlan. And they've also been working with us now for, I believe, I lose track of time because it seems like a lifetime we've been working together, but also 4 to 5 years. Working with women's circles there, but also with men's groups, which we are trying to figure out how to mobilize men as well and include them in processes that they need. It's essential to bring them in as well, and they wish to. So here are Dolores and then Diego.
Muy buenas tardes, mi nombre es Dolores. Quiero compartirles 2 puntos. Uno es la sanación colectiva y el otro es movilización comunitaria. La sanación colectiva inicia a partir de escuchar la realidad de vida a nivel personal, familiar y comunitaria de las personas. Hablar y escuchar los diferentes contextos y problemáticas que afectan a las mujeres se construye de manera colectiva la confianza entre ellas como investigadoras recuperada y como en práctica la sabiduría que les fue transferida por sus madres, abuelas. La sanación empieza a seguir cuando entre todas las participantes de manera colectiva ponen común la diversidad y pluralidad en su conocimiento para ponerlos en práctica. Y para las mujeres quienes participan en los círculos de mujeres, la movilización comunitaria es nueva práctica de poner y compartir sus saberes y múltiples formas de sanación a las demás mujeres, como no participar en los círculos de mujeres de manera directa. Cuando las mujeres se autoconoce como Nahpeitakar, su identidad cultural y su sabiduría se convierte como un servicio a la comunidad, es decir, en la responsabilidad de sus dimensiones social y comunitaria de servicio, acompañar a otras mujeres a reconocer sus papeles como actor para generar procesos, cambios, una movilización comunitaria que nos hace mucho ruido, pero que genera cambio profundo a la vida individual, familiar, social y personal. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Dolores. Diego, ¿quieres seguir?
Sí. Hola a todos, yo soy Diego Maya Tzutupil de Santiago Atitlán. Yo les quiero hablar en esta tarde de 2 temas muy importantes para nosotros y de lo que hemos trabajado en nuestro proyecto de Buena Seña. La primera es la recuperación de la sabiduría ancestral como un punto de liberación comunitaria. La recuperación de la sabiduría ancestral desde las comunidades es poner en práctica los conocimientos que ellos tienen de manera cotidiana en su vida. Pero toda la opresión que se tiene desde una cultura impuesta de manera histórica y sistemática, eso los ha ido olvidándose o no tomando como un factor fundamental para la salud mental, individual, familiar y comunitaria de las personas. Entonces, La recuperación de sabiduría ancestral de las comunidades es muy importante para lograr cambios estructurales y tener programas de prevención para movilizar a las personas, para liberarlos de esa opresión y reconocer sus formas ancestrales, sus formas originarias, cómo organizarse en la comunidad, pero también cómo iniciar procesos de sanación desde los hombres, ¿no? Con los grupos de hombres estamos utilizando el poder de la palabra que ellos tienen, ¿no? Cómo a partir de la palabra, de los círculos de la palabra que tienen, transfieren esos conocimientos con un acompañamiento intergeneracional. Participan jóvenes, hombres de mayor edad, hombres adultos, pero también hombres que prestan un servicio a la comunidad, un servicio para generar esos procesos y poner en práctica que ellos son sujetos de investigación, ¿no? Ellos investigan sus propios conocimientos y lo vuelven a poner en práctica a partir de los círculos y de las reuniones que ellos tienen. Este proceso es fundamentalmente en esa movilización y la decolonización que es muy necesario tener desde los pueblos, ¿no? La opresión que se tiene, pero generar estos procesos en la comunidad genera un camino de liberación para ellos, genera un camino de liberación para que en su comunidad sean reconocidos y recuperen la figura, la autoridad que históricamente se ha tenido en las comunidades indígenas para generar estos procesos. Pero durante toda esta estructura se les ha ido apagando la voz, se les ha ido apagando sus conocimientos. Este proceso ha generado el rescate y la transferencia de estos conocimientos ancestrales que cada uno de ellos tiene. Eso es una primera parte. La otra parte de lo que quiero compartirles es sobre la dinámica de lo individual y lo colectivo a partir de esos procesos de liberación desde las comunidades mayas. Prácticamente el sistema neoliberalismo y los conocimientos biomédicos desde la salud mental nos hablan de una figura individualista, de una figura biomédica, sin reconocer esos conocimientos ancestrales que les estaba diciendo. Pero generar los procesos de una psicología de la liberación, eso hace de que el ser individual de una persona lo pueda transformar y pueda integrarse a un proceso colectivo cuando se hacen los círculos de la palabra con hombres y cuando se hacen los círculos de mujeres con mujeres, ¿no? A partir de este proceso, desde lo individual, se sube a un nivel colectivo, pero también desde ese nivel colectivo vuelve nuevamente a la comunidad de manera individual. Y después de ese nivel individual, genera un impacto colectivo a nivel comunitario, ¿no? Cómo esta dinámica genera procesos muy interesantes donde la persona se reconoce en distintos niveles para actuar desde su comunidad. Desde una perspectiva individual, una perspectiva familiar y una perspectiva comunitaria. Esto es muy fundamental porque este sistema estructural lo que hace es destruir el tejido colectivo de la comunidad. Pero a partir de estos procesos de liberación, las personas que participan vuelven a recuperar esa identidad colectiva en los diferentes niveles donde puede desarrollar su vida, ¿no? Y es de esta manera como estos procesos de liberación que se generan cambios estructurales en toda la comunidad. No es un cambio que pueda tener mucha bulla o mucho eco a nivel mundial, pero los cambios que se generan se hacen de manera silenciosa, pero tienen un cambio profundo, tienen un cambio que impacta la vida de cientos de personas a partir de ellos mismos, a partir de que ellos se reconocen como actores, como autoridades y como personas que investigan y ponen en práctica sus conocimientos que recuperan entre ellos mismos. Esa colectividad es lo que hace de una manera, convierte el círculo de la palabra y los círculos de las mujeres como una riqueza colectiva, plural y diversa, y lo ponen al servicio de la comunidad. Esto es lo que yo les puedo compartir de manera muy sintetizada de años de trabajo que hemos tenido en la comunidad Maya Tzutujil de Santiago Atitlán. Muchas gracias por escuchar.
Gracias, Diego. So I think we'll bring our presentation to a close. Yeah, just thank you so much, everyone, for being here and listening. And we really look forward to the discussion that follows and any questions you have. Yeah.
Well, great. Thank you so much to everyone. I am feeling so inspired and so moved by just the description of these, not only of the projects, but the themes of liberation and transformation and reclamation of ancestral practices. So people, and I love the way you frame this, Diego, so that people can recognize themselves again, and that is such an important part of the healing process. And so I heard that in the themes of both with the work that's happening in Palestine with you, Devin and Hannah, and also Anne-Marie and Sadi and Dolores. Thank you so very much. So I feel like we should take some time to go into small groups. You don't have as much time as we planned, but that's always the way it goes, because the moment is always richer than how we planned. And so I think that just even a short time in some small groups can help us to integrate what we just heard and process it. Maybe 10 minutes, if that's just enough time for people to take a breath together, be in community together, and share some thoughts. We had some questions that we wanted to suggest. We have facilitators, and we have some questions. I'm having a hard time sharing on my computer. If someone on our team could just share the questions in the chat. There's 3 of them. And choose any of those questions that are resonating for you right now. It doesn't have to be all 3. We don't have enough time. Or you can just say how you're feeling right now after hearing stories about these amazing projects. And so we'll have about 10 minutes. And even breathing together is just as important as vocalizing out loud. So also encourage that as well. And I believe that we already have our breakout groups assigned. Is that correct? And that should be happening
right now.
Beautiful.
Okay, Tim says we're all back. Trina, run your magic.
I know. I just want to, well, we both want to welcome everyone back. And I'm so struck by how many people we still have with us. That's really beautiful. So I guess what we like to do is invite some sharing, maybe an idea that came out of your discussions. We forgot to ask people to designate someone, but whatever emerged organically from the process, that's what we're talking about here. So anyone that feels moved to share an idea that came out of your discussion. And this is popcorn style, so anyone who's moved.
Sadi, we designated Sadi. Sadi va a compartir.
¿Y ya? ¿Lo hago ya? Ok. Bueno, en nuestro grupo estuvo muy lindo, bastante dinámico, fue por muy poco tiempo realmente para poder compartir tantas cosas que salen del corazón. Sin embargo, la idea central y lo que llamó mucho la atención del proyecto Buena Semilla es el hecho de que los hombres se estén reuniendo ya en círculos, que es es un reto, ha sido un reto, ha sido un desafío para, no solamente para el proyecto, y también para nuestro compañero Diego, sino que realmente socialmente que los hombres brinden un espacio para poder reunirse ha sido pues un desafío, como les decía, ¿verdad? Pero empezar ya a generar estos espacios está siendo la semilla para que algo lindo empiece a florecer a partir de los hombres, liderado también por mujeres, ¿verdad? Con la inspiración de mujeres. Eso fue la idea central y lo que impactó con las participantes de mi grupo, y muy agradecidas por el reconocimiento y por el espacio. Hizo falta más tiempo, pero fue lo que compartimos. ¿Está bien? Sí. Gracias.
Perfecto. Next.
Beautiful. Let's see.
I'd like to, I would like to share my group, Lynn, Christine, Jade, Annie, Nidal. We have different experiences, but I think the main meaning it's that we need to act and we need to decenter ourselves and try to create these perspectives of human being in community levels, but we need to create these perspectives embodied. It's like we need to use our body and create strategies and try to look for an attitude to promote these social change in different levels. And thank you for sharing and creating this powerful space here.
Wonderful, thank you. Anne-Marie had a hand up.
Yeah, I'd love to share about my group. I feel it was also just a wonderful group. I feel like we were just starting and Jose, Wanda, and Andrea and Edith also. I would love anyone who'd like to stay in touch. I'll put my email below. I feel like the conversation is just beginning. But I wanted to share something that struck a chord. I think it was a bit present in all the groups, all the shares in our group, was just why don't we work across borders more, both internationally and connecting groups with one another, and also between disciplines. Like we're all touching on psychology and education and arts and so many other fields. So that's a bit the synthesis of what came out in our group.
Wonderful. Thank you. Someone else?
Speak briefly about our group.
Devin and then Kathy Hoffman. Devin, go.
Okay, I'll be quick. I notice the time. One of the things we did talk about is just centering knowledge that already is abundant within community members and frontliners, elders, activists. So in the context where I'm in Muhay Maida and in Ida camp, there's so many elders who have such deep knowledge of not only surviving the current situation, but surviving the original displacement, right? And all of the different waves of colonial violences. And then of course, folks coming in and out of prison, as Palestine is the most heavily incarcerated population in the world in many ways. And there's so much wisdom there that coming out in terms of not even talking about mental health sometimes is important, and not even for us thinking about it in terms of mental health is important, right? And understanding that that we're working in a space where there's an absence of a political response, right? So there's when the occupation continues, if we're just focusing on the mental health piece, without understanding all of the movement work on the ground that's bringing forth the future that people need and deserve, We're actually can be completely missing where we need to be. Where we need to be on point and present is to really be uplifting the work of frontliners working in where in so many ways, if you're working in politics and working and to bring forth decolonial futures as an activist, you already are healing. You have to be, right? You're not going to wake up tomorrow and do that if you're not. And so it's where is the knowledge of people who are, of the young people in the camp who wake up every day and are going to school and are fighting for justice. They are mental health workers, right? We don't need to be professionalizing ourselves into being so important, right? So it's kind of decentering ourselves, as was already said. And shout out to everyone who's here. So much love in the space. I see so many friends and new friends. So looking forward to continuing to build. Thank you, everyone.
Shout out for you.
Shout out to Brenton.
Thank
Shout
you
out to
so much.
Trina. Love you all.
Kathy, you get the final comment. Thank you.
Oh, well, I can just pick up on that same theme of seeing lots of beloved faces, old and new. Just three things that came out of our little small group of Dorothy, Orderme, and myself. One was the sense of being in the diaspora, of there being perhaps more tangible resources available here, water, housing, etc. But the isolation and the disconnection from people on the ground is really painful. And that the sense of people who are facing tremendous oppression, having one another and having the collective voicing of that experience together makes so much possible. And then I think the other thing that was interesting to me is, what is the balance between honoring the old stories, bringing up the old stories, and what are the new stories we need to be writing together that take us into some of the places that perhaps where we need to go that we have not touched before.
Wonderful. Trina and I can't thank all of you so very much. We want to also invite anyone who has a few pennies left over as you move to the close of the year. The initiative is very much fundraising. That is, we also are pushing solidarity philanthropy to invite all of you to contribute. Tim is supposed to put a link in the chat. There you go, of how you can donate online. The work that you've been hearing about and the extraordinary resources that we've shared with each other, all of which we hope to be able to net together in new ways at Grassroots International with the Martín Baró Initiative. We so deeply appreciate your being with us, and we invite you. This is what's called a soft fundraiser. That is a soft invite to support in whatever ways you can. Push yourself a little bit further than you've pushed yourself before to share your resources as best you can, so that we can support not only the projects you heard about today, but the other 9 groups who the Martín Baró Initiative identified this year, and the extraordinary work that Grassroots International is doing in so many of its partnerships. We thank you who spoke to us today about the extraordinary work that's being done, about the initiatives that are intergenerational, about the wisdoms from our ancestors, and the incredible challenges, as we've heard, to write new stories together across disciplines and across borders to build bridges, not walls. Thank you so much for being with us. And Trina, one last word from you, and then we will sign off.
Well, I want to echo the love, and I also want people just to note the organizing that's happening in the chat. People are leaving their contact information. There's a letter, a really important letter that we would love for you to share out. Chung-Hwa put a link to that letter in the chat. Please do take a look at that. And just much, much gratitude to all of our speakers and to the communities that are doing the work of healing. And that we hold all of those communities right now in our hearts. And then we lift up our fist. We say their names for people that are killed by the state, targeted by the state. We say their names. We say their names. We say their names. And thank you. It's been an honor to host this event tonight.
Thank you so much to our interpreters. One last thanks, because you are so critical to our being able to be together.
Yes, thank you.
Bravo. Muchas gracias.